in 1 Samuel, and we're going to be in chapter 8 this morning. We'll be in chapter 8 in 1 Samuel. And so I'll let you get there real fast, but I'm going to start out kind of with a story this morning. There's a couple characters in our story, and we have Bobby and Cindy, their brother and sister, and the story of their childhood and how they were instructed to grow up. Bobby was instructed early on that he was told from a young age, a young boy, that he was going to have to get a job early to make enough to provide for his family, to provide for his future, that he has to be responsible, and that the responsibility falls on him to provide. And he was also instructed that when he has a job, he's supposed to rise higher into the business. And whatever you do, whatever you have to do to succeed, you will do it to succeed, because that is who you are as a man. That is what you will do as a man to succeed. You will do anything to succeed. And Bobby was told by the age of 18, you should have been working a few years by now. Just get enough money to buy a car. And then he was instructed, if you make enough money and if you do good things, people will like you. People will look up to you. People will think, man, I kind of want to be like Bobby, right? I want to be like Bobby. So that's Bobby's goal. Bobby's goal is to make enough money so by the age of 18 he can get a car. So he's responsible. He will do anything to succeed. And he was also instructed by the age of 20. This is probably around the age that you're probably going to get married. And so when you get married, you're going to have enough money to provide for your wife and to provide for your future family. And you better be set up so you will be able to buy a house. And so Bobby said, yes, I totally agree. I mean, from the young age, he was instructed to do all these things. And by the age of 24, Bobby has 2 kids, and he makes a significant income. And Bobby he has gone higher up in the business, and now he is able to buy a boat or a camper or whatever as that additional toy, as that additional thing. And he saved enough money. Every single paycheck he puts some aside for his kids to go to college. He puts enough aside so at the end of the year they can look back and be like, oh, is it time to get another vehicle? Is it time to get something newer so we can keep on being successful? And he keeps on putting money away for retirement so him and his family can feel safe at the end of when he retires, at the end of his job. And he's instructed when he was a young boy that your goal as a young man is to provide for your family, to save enough money for your kids for college, and to save up in retirement. And so when you become a grandfather, you can watch your grandkids succeed the way that you succeeded. And you watch your kids prosper like you did, rising up in the business, becoming successful in the town, and becoming successful in every single thing that they do, having some sort of fame to them, and people know that that's Bobby. I want to be like Bobby. That's how Bobby grew up. And he had a sister named Cindy, and Cindy was instructed when she was younger to learn how to help others, to learn how to care for others, and to learn how to help around the house, to bake cookies for those neighbors who aren't feeling well. And her parents said, her mom probably said to her, Cindy, when you're looking for a man, you look for a man that can provide for you. You look for a man that's responsible. You look for a man that has his ducks in a row, that has a job, that can provide for you. And you get married by the age of supposedly 20. And by the age of 24, you'll have a couple kids. And the idea for you is like to raise your kids as sweet and kind, and you are to be polite and well-mannered. And that is what a young lady is supposed to be like. Always polite and sweet and well-mannered. And when you grow up and you have kids and you have the neighbor's kids over and you drink tea or coffee with the neighbor's wife, and while the men are out cooking and grilling hot dogs on the grill. You always have dinner and laundry done, and the house is always spotless because you have to keep everything up around the house while your husband is at work. And you make sure your kids are always well-mannered, and they grow up to be a grandma, and you watch your kids succeed and grow as you did. Bobby, he became the town mayor. He was charismatic and a successful car salesman. He had a boat. He had a nice house. He had a well-groomed lawn. He had the best lawnmower in town. That's what he saved up his money for. He had the best lawnmower. Wow. He had 3 kids that were successful in sports. He gives money to local charities and helps out in the soup kitchen every first Saturday of the month. His kids really never got in trouble in school, and people wanted to be like Bobby. Cindy was a part-time, thriving librarian who knew all of the kids who came into the library and knew their stories. She had a perfect manicured garden, and she had perfect manicured nails, hair, makeup, and clothes. She was well put together. She always was on time to pick up her kids from school. She was never late. She was known to be prompt. And by 5 o'clock every single day, Cindy had dinner for her husband ready to eat when he came home from work. She was also the head of the PTA, and she organizes school functions. And she offers fresh baked cookies to anyone who comes over. If it's the UPS guy, there's a fresh baked cookie for him. And when he comes over and drops off a package. And her house is always clean. And other ladies looked at Cindy, saying, "Man, I want to be like Cindy." And other men looked at Bobby and said, "Man, I want to be like Bobby." They got their ducks in a row. They got their stuff together. And Bobby and Cindy have this perceived good life going for them. They are successful. They are famous in their good deeds, and they have money to fall back on. They rose in the ranks in their community, and people wanted to be like Bobby and Cindy. Who wouldn't really want to be like Bobby and Cindy? They were living the American dream to the fullest. Well, now we will turn to 1 Samuel 8. And Israel also had a dream. Israel had this dream of thriving. Israel had this dream of being independent. Israel had this dream of other countries looking to Israel to see what success really looks like. And Israel was unhappy with where they were at. And Israel, in chapter 8 in 1 Samuel, demands a king. Israel has this dream of having a ruler and no longer having judges per se. And they were not satisfied with judges any longer. Judges did not have the power like kings had, but kings had more power, supposedly, than the judges did. And because if they have one king, that's that one person that they look to. And this is Israel's dream, is to have a king. And they wanted a leader of the nation of Israel. That is Israel's dream. So we're going to start reading in 1 Samuel 8, verses 1 through 9. The story of Samuel. Samuel is a prophet. He is a seer, as we will see in these next few verses. And in the beginning, in the book of 1 Samuel, we see that God speaks to Samuel. Even when it is uncomfortable, God speaks to Samuel, and he speaks through Samuel, and he says, I want you to convey this to the people. Even though the people are not going to like it, I want you to convey this message because this is what I see. And so God is putting this basically vision of what he sees into Samuel, so Samuel can convey what he sees, that what God has given him to the people to warn the people. And this is who Samuel is. So chapter 8, verse 1. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they were judges in Beersheba. But yet his sons did not walk in the ways that he did, and they turned aside after gain, and they took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders in Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and said, Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the other nations. But the thing displeased Samuel, and when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they did not reject you, but they have rejected me from being the king over them. According to all the deeds and that they have done from the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. Sobering, huh? Israel had a dream of having a king, and yet they had a king all along, and they didn't realize that they had the king of the universe as their king.
Yes.
And I'll read it again out of verse 7. Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, Samuel, but they have rejected me, God, from being king over them. They didn't reject Samuel, but they rejected God from being king over them. Why did Israel want a king? To be like the others, to be like the other nations. They were not satisfied with what they had, and they needed more. They wanted what other nations had. Israel wanted to be like other nations. They wanted to live the other nations' good life to the fullest. Kind of like Bobby and Cindy. People look at Bobby and Cindy, man, I want to be like Bobby. I want to be like Cindy. They got that American dream down. They are successful. They are famous. They look good. They have money saved up. They have their life together in a nice little bow. I want to be like Bobby and Cindy because that's the American dream. The American dream to have all the things that I need so I can pass all of my things on to my grandkids so they'll be set up for life, so they'll have security and be safe. But there's a couple things that people don't see in Bobby and Cindy's story. People see the outside of Bobby and Cindy. People see the outside of Bobby going to the soup kitchen every first Saturday of the month, but what people don't see is that Bobby gets angry with his wife when the laundry isn't done on time on his watch. People don't see that Bobby fills up his water bottle with alcohol to cope with his stress at work when he doesn't sell enough cars. People don't see him going to use porn after he gets into a fight with his wife, and he goes and uses that to relax.
Yeah.
People don't see him calling his kids names and threatening them to have good behavior so he doesn't look bad in front of his friends and in front of his community. People don't see the fits of rage that he has, and that when he cries alone in anger because he can't make the house payment on time because he got the new lawnmower. People see the American dream body, but people don't see what the American dream did to Bobby.
Yeah. Right.
People don't see that Bobby is serving the American dream.
Yeah.
If people saw this Bobby, would they want to be like Bobby? So Cindy, what people don't see with Cindy. Cindy's the thriving librarian who knows all the kids' names, who has fresh baked cookies for the UPS guy when he comes to the door. But people don't see Cindy, how she negatively talks about herself because she isn't as perfect as everybody thinks that she is. People don't see Cindy look at herself in the mirror and ridicule everything about her looks because she isn't picture perfect. People don't see Cindy ridicule her daughter for eating that extra cookie so she doesn't become fat. People don't see Cindy cry herself to sleep because her relationship with her husband is on the rocks and she really can't trust him anymore. People don't see the passive-aggressive response that she gives to her husband and holding her husband in an emotional prison because he lashed out at her. People don't see Cindy tell her children not to hang out with kids that are not in their socioeconomic class because it is not the image that she wants to give off to those in her community. People see the Cindy that has well-groomed garden, perfect hair, perfect nails, has her house together, has dinner on the table at 5 o'clock, and who's waiting on her husband to throw the laundry in after a long day of work. But if people saw this Cindy that looks at herself in the mirror and literally hates herself and what she looks like because she can't keep up with her own expectations or the expectations of the American dream of being perfect, of being successful, of being famous, and being known for her good deeds. Israel didn't see all the things that they wanted that the other nations were going through. Israel didn't see the other nations' king serving other gods and sacrificing children on the altars of Baal, and their people being in poverty and not caring for them. Israel only saw a king that they wanted, and they wanted a king. And I don't know about you, but I can relate with the American dream.
Yeah.
I can relate with wanting those things. And Israel, and we can relate with Israel. We can relate with wanting something and not knowing the full story of what happens when you want something so bad. And Samuel goes on to say, and he gives Israel a warning. He gives Israel a warning of, this is what you want. This is what you think looks real good. But this is what's going to happen in verse 10 through 22. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them his chariots and to be his horsemen, and will run before his chariots. And he will appoint himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his implements of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, your olive orchards, and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vineyards, and he will give them to your officers and his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants, and the best of your young men and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because your king, of whom you chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not answer you in that day. Verse 19. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, No, that will not happen, but there shall be a king over us, that we may be like all the other nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and to fight for our battles. Samuel warns Israel, if you want a king like other nations, this is what you're going to get. Everything that you know here, right now, is going to change. Everything that you feel comfortable with, you will no longer feel comfortable with. You will not be comforted. Because you yourselves will be turned into servants and slaves. Your daughters will be bakers, and your daughters will be perfumers. Your sons will go out and to wage war and to go in front of the king's chariots. And let's look at this response one more time, shall we? In verses 19 and 20 in chapter 8, they say, No, but there shall be a king over us, that we may be like all other nations. Pay attention to this. And that our king will judge us and go out before us and to fight for our battles. That is the exact opposite of what Samuel just told them. The exact opposite. What they are wanting here, they are wanting this great idea, the perfect king. They see from a distance how good it looks, but they haven't been up close to see what it actually looks like. And Samuel says, No, your king isn't going to go fight your battles for you. You're going to go fight the battles for your king. He's not going to fight for you. You're going to do it for him. You're not understanding this dynamic. And what they really wanted is they didn't want to do necessarily anything themselves, but they wanted a king to do it for them, because that's what they perceived. That's what the picture they perceived from other nations was, is, well, this king fights for his people, and he does X, Y, and Z, and he's so great, but they don't see the destruction. And kind of like our story with this American dream that we are all very familiar with. That when we serve something like that, we don't see the destruction of Bobby and Cindy and what's happening in their inner life, but we only see what's happening in their outward life. Yeah. We only see the clothes that they put on, but we don't see what's happening in their heart. We see that they're serving the American dream, but we don't see them being bound and being a slave to the American dream in their heart. And this is what Israel had. This is the tension that Israel had. Israel's tension is they wanted Israel's dream. They wanted to serve Israel's dream, but they didn't understand the bondage and the slavery that was going to come with that dream, because they have rejected the king overall. they actually rejected the king that was going to fight their battles for them. They rejected the king that brought them out of Egypt, that saved and rescued them out of slavery. They rejected the king because they said, Samuel, you don't know what you're talking about. They rejected the king and his wisdom, while Samuel was willing to speak the words of God. Because they didn't reject Samuel, they rejected God. Yep. And so we see this dynamic of Israel's dream. And what does God do? What does God say to Samuel? He says, the people are going to do what the people are going to do. And I am warning the people, but the people are going to do what the people are going to do. And how many times have we been on that side? That we've seen something, kind of been warned about it, we're like, oh, that looks so good, I kind of want to do it anyway. That's Israel. That's us. Yeah. That's us. They see a dream, they go after it, they don't know the exact consequences of everything. And we do the same exact thing. But we have a choice, just like Israel had a choice, is to say, you know what, Samuel? You know, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily even agree with what you're saying, but I trust what you're saying because you have been trustworthy this entire time. Because the God that you serve, Yahweh, yep, the King of Kings, is trustworthy this entire time. We have that same choice. Even when it comes to our dreams, even when it comes to this perceived American dream. And I brought this kind of contrast up because this is where we're at. This is what we can relate with. Yeah. And there are picture-perfect things that we see that we just, man, that looks good. I want that. But and what is really happening here, the root of what's happening, is that Israel is comparing themselves to another nation. Israel comparison nation. Israel comparison nation. And what happens when you compare yourself to somebody else? Fall short. You're not actually being the person that you're supposed to be. Right. And you're looking to see what they have. I mean, gosh, it's one of the 10 Commandments, basically. Do not covet your neighbor's car. Do not covet your neighbor's, you know. And so this idea of coveting your neighbor's God is really what it is. And really coming to understand, wow, what God am I serving? Am I serving the God of the American dream? Am I serving the God of Israel's dream? Or am I serving the King of Kings that maybe I don't necessarily understand this morning, but I trust in his faithfulness and I trust in everything that he's done for me? And I mean, we see it in our lives. We see it when God rescued us from a place to where we were never supposed to be at. Yeah. We see it from the times to where we went this way. God was clearly saying, don't go that way. There is going to be destruction there, but it looks so good. Yeah. And then when we get there, God's not saying, well, I told you so. He's saying, well, let me help you out. He's saying, let me help you out. And that's exactly what he does to Israel. And then that's why we're hopping forward and we're going into Matthew 11. We're going to go into and we're going to look at Matthew 11 because God saves and rescues Israel as God saves and rescues us today. And the king that we are serving isn't the king that's going to leave us in our destruction, isn't going to leave us in our idealistic dream state, isn't going to leave us in this spot of coveting my neighbor's dream, of coveting my neighbor's lifestyle. But he's saying, you have a better purpose for your life. This dream that you're serving isn't a dream at all. It is destruction. But if you serve me, the King of Kings, I will show you what it's like to have true freedom. I will show you what it's like to serve a true king. And I will show you what it's like to have true peace. And I will show you what it's like to really have rest. Because what Samuel was warning Israel, they weren't going to enter into rest. They weren't going to enter into peace. They were going to enter into slavery. And that's what our dreams do when we don't have God at the top. Yeah. When we're not serving him above every single thing else. The things, even though the things in the American dream is good. It's good. It's good to save up money. You don't want to flounder your money away. It's good to be an example for your community. It's good to understand people. It's good to give cookies to the UPS man. It's good. Okay? It's good. But when your heart is serving that dream, that phantom that doesn't exist on a throne, then that's when it turns bad. When your heart isn't serving the king that is going to protect you, the king that's going to fight for you, and the king that's going to bring you wholeness, that is when you become the Bobby and Cindy that they looked in the mirror and they hated. But the king that we get to serve, King Jesus, because the king had a different plan, and the king exists here, and his name is Jesus, and he says to us in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This is the king that we serve. This is the king that came down to earth to be a sacrifice for us, even when we have turned our backs on him, even when we wanted another king for ourselves. This is the king that we serve, and this is the king that is on the throne, and this is the king that we can turn to, who will give us true rest, true peace, and take everything on for us. He will fight our battles for us. He will fight on our behalf, and he will be with us in times of trouble, and we will not be slaves to ourselves. We will not be slaves to any other dream, but what he has for us. That is the king that we serve. We serve King Jesus. We serve King Jesus. And if we have any other picture of what it looks like to serve Jesus, I want this to be our picture for this morning. Especially in comparison to 1 Samuel 8. Because this is the king that was speaking to the Israelites then, and this is the king that is speaking to us now.
Yes.
So, I don't know about you, but when I was reading 1 Samuel 8, and when I was looking at this stuff, and when I was preparing this, I was a little convicted of myself. Well, what am I serving? What kind of dreams have I thought that are great? What kind of things did I necessarily put higher than the King of Kings? And we have to reflect, and it's not as I feel that you understand, and as we go on to understanding, it's not our outer selves that have to look good, but it's our inner self that really takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work for wholeness. It takes a lot of work to find that peace. But Jesus, he gives us that. And so today, will you stand with me?